Hello students, we are again here with a new topic, organizational development. I am Dr. Zeba, Assistant Professor, Department of Home Science, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. In today's session, we will explore the key aspects of organizational development, including its introduction, relevance, historical background, major models, and interventions. Let us start by understanding the meaning of organization development, also called OD in short. Organizational development is the use of behavioral science to help organizations improve, adapt, and grow with the goal of better change, capabilities, higher effectiveness, financial strength, employee satisfaction, and sustainability. What sets organizational development apart is its focus on long-term adaptability and not just projects or products. Organizational development is both a practice with tools like team building, job enrichment, and structural change, and a field of study exploring how change happens and what makes it successful. For better understanding of organizational development, let's look at some of its important definitions. According to Bennis, organizational development is a response to change and a nuanced, educated strategy that updates the beliefs, values, and structure of the organizations to allow them to better adapt to changing times. While Cummings and Worley describe OD as the systematic use of behavioral science to develop and reinforce organizational strategies, structures, and processes for improving organizational effectiveness. French and Bell have explained organizational development through three key points. The first point is orientation, which means planning activities to achieve favorable and noticeable outcomes for the organization. Second is target, which refers to the human aspect of the organization manifested in individual and social processes. And in the last point is setting, which refers to the application of OD in real life organizations. Beer also outlined three aims of OD. First is improving the alignment between an organization's structure, strategy, processes, people, and culture. Second is fostering creativity and innovative solutions. And third is building the organization's capacity for continuous self-renewal. Now, let's move on to the major factors driving the need for organizational development strategy. First is globalization. International markets are changing quickly with shifts in governments, leadership, and economies. Second is information technology. It is transforming how we use information, calculate costs, and carry out work. And the last one is managerial innovations. Together with globalization and technology, they are speeding up the creation of new organizational forms. Now, let's look at the relevance of organizational development. Organizational development uses behavioral science to improve both individual and organizational effectiveness. In today's complex and fast changing world, it helps organizations adapt and perform better. It is also valuable for professionals, consultants, managers, administrators, and staff specialists who guide and support performance improvements. Finally, OD benefits top leaders, helping them build organizations that are more adaptable, resilient, and effective. Moving on to the historical background of OD. It is generally seen as evolving from five major stems. These are laboratory training, action research or survey feedback, normative approaches, quality of work life, and strategic change. Let's learn about each one of them individually. Starting with laboratory training, in organizational development, laboratory training, also known as T group training, is a method where small groups learn about themselves and others through direct interaction. It began in 1946 with Kurt Lewin at the National Training Laboratory. Participants focus on their behaviors, feelings, and group dynamics, gaining feedback and self awareness. Over time, this approach, once called T groups, evolved into today's widely used team building practices. The second stem of OD was pioneered in the 1940s by Kurt Lewin and other social scientists. It is known as action research. It combines research and action. Consultants and organizational members work together, collecting data, identifying problems, and taking steps for improvement. The key idea is participation, where employees themselves help design and implement change. Survey feedback is a major tool of action research. Surveys such as Likkert's 5 point scale are used to gather employee attitudes and perceptions. The results are then shared back with members, helping them recognize issues, build self awareness, and work collectively on solutions. The normative background in organizational development defines the ideal way organizations should function by setting benchmarks for effective behavior. Rensis Likert outlined four systems: exploitative, benevolent, consultative, and the participative system, which is considered the ideal. Blake and Morton's managerial grid also showed how balancing concern for production and people leads to effective leadership. In short, this background provides models to guide organizations toward the ideal system. The quality of work life STEM was introduced by Eric Trist and colleagues at the Tavistock Institute in the 1950s, focusing on integrating people and technology. Quality of work life programs involved unions and management redesigning jobs to give employees more discretion, variety, and feedback, leading to self managing work groups. This approach, through job enrichment and teamwork, improved both productivity and employee satisfaction. The strategic change STEM in organizational development emerged as organizations facing growing technological, social, and political complexity. Pioneers like Richard Beckert, Eric Trist, and Ken Bamford emphasize that organizations consist of both technical and social elements which constantly influence one another. This approach focuses on aligning an organization's vision, culture, and environment. The idea is that when these three are in harmony, both productivity, and employee satisfaction increase. Now that we have a basic understanding of OD and how it works, let's move on to some of its major models. Organizational change is explained through two main theories. The first is the change process theory, which focuses on why and how change occurs. This has largely been developed by academics. The second is the implementation theory, which looks at what actions or behaviors actually cause and direct change. These models come mainly from practitioners. The first one, the three-step model of change, is given by Kurt Lewin, who believed that human behavior is shaped by opposing forces. Change happens when the balance between these forces is shifted. For example, in organizations, incentives may push for change as driving forces, while group expectations may resist as restraining forces. Levin explained this through three steps. The first step is unfreezing, where people are prepared for change. The second step is change, where new behaviors are introduced. Finally, refreezing stabilizes these changes so they become part of the organization's culture. The unfreezing stage is about loosening existing norms and practices. It reduces the forces that keep behaviors rigid while strengthening the forces that push toward change. This prepares members for the transition ahead. Unfreezing can be achieved in three ways: disconfirmation by showing flaws in current practices, inducing guilt or anxiety by highlighting gaps between current and ideal processes, and creating psychological safety by assuring people that change won't threaten their roles or well being. The change stages where the actual implementation takes place, moving the organization toward a new balance. Change can be seen at three levels: at the individual level, where people adopt new behaviors and skills; at the structural level, which shifts in hierarchies, reporting, and rewards; and at the interpersonal level, where trust and openness grow and conflicts reduce. The supportive processes from the unfreezing stage, like creating safety, continue to be important during this phase. The refreezing stage is the final step of change. At this point, the new behaviors and practices are integrated into the organization's norms and values. The goal is to create a stable equilibrium where the changes become the new normal. To achieve this, the changes must be reinforced through organizational processes and management systems. Now let's move on to the action research model of Lewis. This model is built on his three-step model. It emphasizes collaboration between the change agent and organization members to solve problems and generate knowledge. The model assumes that cycles of data collection and action work best when members are engaged, and that the knowledge gained prepares the organization for both expected and unexpected outcomes. Another key framework is the action research model, which is built on seven steps. The process begins with the first step, which is problem identification. It starts when an issue is recognized in the organization. It is usually identified by senior management and ideally addressed with the support of an OD practitioner. The second step is consultation with a behavioral science expert. At this stage, an OD expert is engaged. The expert develops a blueprint for change and ensures the process is carried out in an open and cooperative manner. The third step is data gathering and diagnosis. OD practitioners and organizational members work together to collect information, identify root causes, and use tools like observation, interviews, and questionnaires. The fourth step is feedback, in which the practitioner shares findings with the team to highlight strengths and weaknesses. Openness is the key, but sensitive data must remain confidential. This step also checks if the organization is ready for change. At the fifth step, joint diagnosis of the problem is done. Here, the practitioner and members work together to identify the root causes. Any communication gap can lead to misdiagnosis, which may derail the change process or create resistance. The sixth step is joint action planning. At this stage, both sides agree on the actions to be taken. The choice of actions depend on the diagnosed problem, organizational culture, and the nature of the intervention. The final step is action or intervention, where the plan is put into practice through changes at the individual level, like job roles, at the group level, like team behavior, and at the organizational level, such as vision or mission. Now, let's look at the appreciative inquiry model. Unlike the problem focused action research model, appreciative inquiry takes a positive approach, using storytelling to generate ideas and blueprints for change. This model is based on a few key assumptions. Every individual has expectations and goals that shape their behavior and communication. When people hold positive expectations about the organization, they are more likely to act in ways that bring those beliefs to life. It also emphasizes that new ideas are essential for driving change, something traditional action research may not always achieve. The most common framework used here is the 4D model. This describes change as a cycle of four stages: discovery, dream, design, and delivery or destiny. The 4D model of appreciative inquiry has four stages. The first is discovery, where participants reflect and share experiences to identify what works well in the organization. Next is dream, where members imagine the organization's ideal future and identify common goals and aspirations. The third stage is design, which turns those dreams into practical plans and assigns responsibility for leading change. Finally, we have delivery or destiny, where actions are implemented, outcomes are reviewed, and adjustments are made, continuing the cycle of improvement. Cummings and Worley developed the general model of planned change by integrating three OD models. This approach blends problem solving with the use of existing best practices. The first stage is entering and contracting. At this stage, the organization clarifies the need for change through activities like data gathering, discussions, setting expectations, and resource planning. The outcome is a contract that defines actions, resources, and roles. However, barriers such as disagreements, resource limitations, or more feasible alternatives may arise. It is also important to consider cultural and contextual factors while moving forward. The second stage is diagnosis and feedback. It examines the organization's current state and root causes through data collection, analysis, and feedback. Diagnosis is done at three levels: organization, group, and individual. The third stage is planning and implementing change. Here, interventions are designed based on the diagnosis, considering readiness, capability, and power distribution. Interventions may focus on human processes, structure, human resources, or strategy. In the final stage of OD, the effects of interventions are evaluated. This acts as a feedback process to decide whether changes should continue, be updated, or be stopped. To stabilize and institutionalize change, organizations use reinforcement techniques such as rewards, training, and feedback. Now let's discuss interventions in organization development. Interventions are planned programs designed to solve problems or achieve organizational goals. They aim to improve work performance, motivation, retention, and even processes and technology while also strengthening professional relationships. These interventions help organizations move from their current state to an ideal one by improving practices and shaping culture. They can operate at the individual, group, or organizational level and are broadly grouped into four types. Let's begin with the first type of OD intervention. It is known as human processes interventions. These focus on people and how they work together to achieve goals. The key processes are communication, decision making, problem solving, and leadership. Rooted in psychology and group dynamics, the idea is that fulfilled members make the organization more effective. They work at two levels. First is individual and group level, which includes process consultation, third party intervention, team building, and the second is organization and system level, which includes confrontation meetings, intergroup relations. Now let's look at interventions at the individual and group levels. Process consultation focuses on group dynamics and relationships, helping members solve their own problems. It deals with issues like miscommunication and dysfunctional norms, mostly at the group level. Third party intervention addresses conflicts that disrupt work using bargaining, reconciliation, or group problem solving. It applies at both individual and group levels. Team building improves team effectiveness by clarifying goals, roles, resources, and strategies, while strengthening both task and interpersonal processes. It is mainly at the group level. At the organizational and system levels, there are three interventions. The first one is organization confrontation meeting, where members jointly diagnose problems and set goals, often to handle stress or urgent issues. Second is intergroup relations, which improves relationships between departments with consultants helping groups identify causes and solutions. And the last one is large group interventions, which bring stakeholders together to raise awareness, solve problems, and create shared norms and vision. Moving on to the second type of OD intervention, techno-structural interventions deals with the technical side of organizations such as job design, task methods, and structure. They are based on sociology, psychology, and engineering with the goal of improving both productivity and employee fulfillment. There are three main types: structural design, which creates more flexible ways to divide work; downsizing, which means cutting costs through layoffs, redesign, or outsourcing; and re engineering, which radically redesigns processes for faster response and better performance. The next type of intervention is the human resource management interventions or HRM intervention, which supports employees through goal setting, rewards, career planning, and performance appraisal. The idea is that when people are well integrated, the organization becomes more effective. Key types include goal setting, which aligns personal and organizational goals with clear targets; performance appraisal, which gives feedback and evaluates strengths and achievements; and finally, reward systems, which uses promotions, salary hikes, and perks to boost performance. And finally, the last type of intervention is the strategic interventions. It acts as a bridge between an organization's internal working and its external environment, helping it adapt to changing times. It is adapted from economics, anthropology, strategic management, and organization theory. There are four key types of strategic interventions, namely integrated strategic change, which aligns strategies and systems; culture change, which builds strong values and commitment; mergers and acquisitions, which combines organizations while managing culture, finance, and leadership; and finally, self designing organizations, which supports continuous change with stakeholder involvement. Thus, we come to the end of this topic. We'll meet again for the next lecture. Thank you.